Alright guys, so welcome back to the channel. We are going over the gear today that I use at the S&S Training Solutions Winter Forge event, which was a cold weather training event that they held up in Missouri. It was Friday night, really kicked off Saturday morning, Sunday, Monday. So 3 full day event, 2 nights out in the field, and 1 night, that first night, up in the GP tent. So Brent's done a few of these videos where he talked about, and I talked about gear that we thought we would need going to that event. What I thought I would do this time was show you guys the gear after the event, what I actually use. So they've held that event for 2 years and it's going strong, so I'm sure they'll hold it again in the future. And so for those of you looking for what you might want to pack in the future, I thought I'd go over my gear, show you what worked and what didn't, what I needed and maybe what I didn't need. So let's get right on with it. There were 3 uniforms that they sort of, 3 camouflage patterns that they would allow, which was multicam, olive green, or woodland. We ended up being on the multicam team, so multicam was the only one that I needed. But I had taken my olive greens, which I ended up not using, and my woodland camis, which I could have used but also ended up not using because I was using the multicam instead. I did take a woodland Equic set, the outer shell. We'll get into that in a minute. I had my woodland boonie. Now this has got a field modification to it, as you can see. I ended up wearing a headset, communication headset, and between the boonie having the miles system on top and the earmuffs for the headset, this wasn't really working. We ended up cutting out the sides of the boonie. It worked fantastic. It was one of the best mods I had all weekend. So this was definitely something to remember. Take a boonie that you can sacrifice, and you can use your earmuffs, no problem, with the mouse sensors on top. It was actually very comfortable and worked out good. So this was a piece of kit that I definitely used and was glad that I took. So here's my multicam set that I wore, and I just wore this as an outer garment. This isn't going to provide any warmth at all, really at all. It was just an outer garment just so I could comply with the camouflage colors of the team, and it worked fine for that. No big deal there. So for my base layers, wools were boss. I've got my wool socks. I wore 2 pair of these. I started out with 1 pair and noticed the first morning it was cold. It was down into the low 20s, but it would warm up throughout the day, but would start out in the low 20s. It was cold, and I noticed my toes were getting cold, and that's one thing you want to monitor, one thing that they teach you. So 2 pairs of wool socks is what I ended up going with, and that was fine, and I wore those throughout the weekend. I have this merino wool neck scarf. I kept this on most of the time. Sometimes during the day when it started to warm up, we would see temps almost up to 40, and when that happened, then this might come off. Easy enough to take off if you feel yourself sweating if you're on the move, but for stationary positions and for light duty, this was great. And along with this, I had my merino wool top. Absolutely worth its weight in gold. This one's made by Mary Wool. It's designed in Australia, I believe, and made here in the USA. I'm not sure. Maybe made in China. I don't remember. But anyway, merino wool. This was an absolute great top, and this stayed on the whole time. I never took this off. Same thing with these bottoms. Same brand. Never took them off. These were up against my skin the entire time, and they were fantastic. Fantastic piece of kit. Was very happy to have worn those. That's my base layer. Now to supplement my base layer, I had this fleece top here, zip front, just a regular old military fleece top. I wore this sometimes, not all the time. When it was really cold, or if I was on just stationary watch, I definitely wanted to have this on over that merino wool base layer. But as soon as we started moving, if we went on patrol, recon, whatever, this became too hot and I would lose this. So this was the one piece of clothing that I constantly added, removed to regulate my core temperature. This was kind of the key to that, okay? And sort of lastly, as my outer layer, I had this Soviet Gorka. This is wonderful. The pants were very comfortable. They're oversized. They have elastic. There's a lot of give there, so when you've got your multiple layers, the multiple layers aren't a problem. I never got wet through the knees. So the weather was like this. We started out with snow on the ground, and then it would sort of try to melt throughout the day, and it would refreeze at night. So during the day, the whole ground was wet. It wasn't raining, but the ground was wet from the melting snow. These didn't get wet through, and I was very impressed with that. It was my first time really using these on a training exercise. These big side pockets were wonderful, single button, great. You're not having to fiddle with zippers or anything. The stirrups and the foot box kept these from pulling out of your boots. The suspenders were super comfortable. Brand ended up taking a pair of these suspenders and putting them on his regular US cami pants because they're that comfortable, not having to deal necessarily with a belt on these pants. Same thing for the jacket. I didn't wear this the whole time because I had that cami top, but I wore this for part of the time. And again, absolutely fantastic piece of kit for that type of weather. Now, had it have been raining the whole time, or we were in a rainstorm, I don't expect this would have kept me dry, which is why I took the Equix, and we'll get into that in a minute. But this was a great piece of kit for the weather that we had, where the ground was wet, maybe a little mild precipitation, but nothing serious. Well, look at my boots. These are like a Merrell tactical boot. They are made out of Gore-Tex, and they're supposed to be fairly waterproof. They worked okay. They were comfortable, and they held up for the weekend. I'm not sure if they would have held up for a month out in the field. I felt like I needed a heavier boot. Again, they worked, but I wasn't in love with them. And this is something that I'll probably will replace for the next one. I will wear a heavier military boot rather than trying to take more of a civilian, I'm gonna say law enforcement boot that is great out on the concrete, but probably not well suited for the muddy conditions that we were in. They worked. Like I said, it snowed that first day. We had snow on the ground, so these are my overwhites. This is just a Italian surplus overwhite set made of cotton. Some of the guys had overwhites that were made of a synthetic material. Let me recommend that. You see how snow started to melt and we got pretty muddy. But these worked fine as an oversuit, but I would have preferred to have had a synthetic set. So that they wouldn't have held so much water. These didn't really hold a lot of water, but you never know. That synthetic set is thinner, lighter, and it's particularly lighter if they get wet. So if you're gonna look at buying a set of overwhites, just let me recommend a synthetic set rather than cotton. All right, two more pieces of absolutely important kit. Knee pads. This might depend on the terrain and where you are, but out there in Missouri, it's very rocky, man. It's just, my knees last time just got destroyed, taking a knee constantly every time that we would stop while we were moving on patrol. It always seemed like your knees go down. I got bony knees. It seems like they go down on something thorny anyway. So these were an absolute necessity. And if not two, at least take one, because you're going to take one knee. And I ended up, man, I was wore out. I ended up swapping them over. Loaned one out, swapping over, did one knee one day, one knee the other day. But a good set of knee pads that are comfortable, and test these out before you go, absolutely important. And my gloves, these little Oakley gloves, I did not think these were going to be enough, but they worked great. I took a heavier pair of gloves, we'll look at it in a minute, still in my pack. I never took them out, I never needed them. This is all I needed for that weather down into the 20s, because I kept moving, blood was flowing, I was fairly warm, and these were perfect, and they're thin enough that I could do most tasks that I needed to do with the gloves on. And also these were useful when I was carrying my rifle, because I have an aluminum rail on that rifle. We'll talk about it in a minute. It got cold. I hadn't noticed this before, but that aluminum rail, all of you that have those like aluminum free float rails, they're going to get cold in cold temperatures, and that's something you're going to have to deal with. These helped with that a little bit. Okay, so we've covered basically our clothing, our base layers, with the exception of the Equix, which we'll get into because it's inside my ruck. So for this event, I took a medium ruck and with a frame. And first of all, we started out on the very bottom. I've got a Gore-Tex outer shell with a black military sleeping bag. I also took a fleece liner for that I ended up not using, and we'll probably find that when we start going through this rucksack. But that's what's in the bottom bag, and that's in a compression sack. And that compression sack was necessary and great. I was glad I had it. Keeps the dirt and water off of your sleeping bag and off of your Gore-Tex cover, and it just allows you to cinch that up nice and tight. Like they say, a tight pack is a light pack. I've also got a strap that goes, just a general purpose strap that goes all the way around that ruck, so that whenever I got it packed back up, I could cinch it back down tight. So we're going to start taking a look at this ruck. We're not going to take the sleeping system apart because I've told you what that is, but let's look and see what's left inside this ruck, what I used and what I didn't use. So first of all, I've got my little first aid kit, and this is a first aid kit. There's nothing life-saving in here, with maybe the exception of like a Benadryl, but this has got Band-Aids, moleskin, eye solution, chapstick. It's got some medication, some Advil, things of that nature. Again, just first aid, not life-saving stuff, but this comes in real handy. I didn't need it, although I took some Advil. I believe I took some Advil once, just dealing with the headache. So inside that ruck, I also had this, and I would put this in my pocket sometime. This is just a mesh scarf, and you can use this multi-use item. But I kind of set it up as a blind a couple of times when I was just sitting out in the open, and or sitting in a tree line. I kind of set it up as a blind so I could move a little bit behind it if I needed to, without anyone seeing necessarily that movement. So I did actually use this, and this is something that goes with me every time, everywhere I go. So in these three pockets, one of the things I carried is they issued us an MRE. We were issued MREs in Mountain House as our primary chow. I tore this MRE down, and I ended up not consuming hardly any of it. There were a couple of snacks in there that I took one time when I was sitting down, but other than that, I ended up not using it, but I had it. So a few other things I took, we were really focused on keeping warm foods inside us whenever we could. So I've got these little Spam single classics as a protein. I've got this Mexican soup here that's fantastic. Put this with a little water inside your mess kit, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Cook that up, and that's really nice when you're just like cold at night. Maybe you're out on sentry duty and you've got a nice warm soup. I ended up putting one of these on one of our tent stoves, warming it up while I was sleeping. And then when I got up to go out to do perimeter duty, I had this with me, and it was fantastic and really helped pass the time when you're just sitting in the dark listening for someone pushing into your perimeter. Also had some dehydrated potatoes, some more soup, some coffee for Brent, because everybody knows he loves coffee. But I also had a little bit of this myself, and that's just instant coffee. But this kind of stuff was the types of foods that they recommend that you bring, just because it's a way for you to also get hydrated. Nobody likes drinking just warm water, and this is a way for you to get that water into your system. I also had a packet of chunk chicken that I used in one of these soups. I just opened that up and put in there when I cooked the soups up. But this is all food related stuff. I didn't mention this, but sewing kit, I didn't need it, but it's always good to have a little sewing kit with you. This one's a little bit elaborate. There's a lot of buttons and a lot of string and whatnot in this one, but you can replace a button or tear up a torn piece of equipment with the sewing kit. Not everybody in your squad needs one of these, but one person in your squad does. This little bag, this is just a personal hygiene bag, and I really broke it down. There's not much in here. There's some contacts for my eyes, toothbrush, toothpaste, some eye solution, and a couple of toothpicks. That's about it. It's pretty broken down, pretty simple. This is my little notepad. This was necessary. I've got different pens, which I loaned out to a few people that didn't have pens. Some guys were writing stuff on their hands and their arms, so it's good to have a notepad with you because you're eventually going to get some information that you're going to need to write down, whether it's got to do with the terrain features or map points that you've got, rally points, codes that you're using on the radio, challenge codes, or mission requirements. We went on a recon mission and there were different requirements, and you know, when you're tired and you're beat, you might forget one of those, and if you write it down you won't forget. So you don't need anything this big, but at least a little notepad with a pen. Okay, so I wore this quite a bit. This is my fleece beanie. This one's actually insulated on the inside, but a lot of guys were wearing these. These were really popular, so I'd recommend that you definitely take one of these, as small as they are. Great for sleeping in as well. Paracord, I've got several bits of paracord, and we did use this. Okay, so a few last things. This is a shelter, sil nylon tarp, if you will. I could have made like a survival shelter out of this, a plow point or something. I didn't need it. I probably would still take it because I could have easily got put in a mission where I did need it. I just didn't happen to have to use it. Things like this, like a recharge battery pack and all the batteries that you need for your optic. Make sure you got a spare battery if your optic is battery dependent. Flashlights that you may have or headlamps, make sure that you've got spare batteries. Anything that takes power, the cold is very, very hard on that power, so make sure you've got some way of recharging those. Some face paint, I didn't need this. They kind of didn't want us to wear face paint because if you've got face paint, it's hard to monitor your cheeks and your nose, and those could get cold and start suffering from frostbite. That's something your medic's going to be looking for. So they kind of discourage the use of face paint, but this does have a mirror in it, and that could come in useful if you had something in your eye or something. Okay. In this bag, I've got a down jacket, like a puffy jacket. And what I like about it is that it squeezes down to just nothing. It weighs almost nothing. I didn't need it. I never got that cold. If I'd have been stuck outside for a long time without any movement at all, it might have been nice to have. I even tried using it as a pillow one time, and it got kind of hot, so it was a little bit over the top. I might not take that next time. E-tool, this was used. Everybody in a squad doesn't need one of these, but somebody does. We use these for digging Dakota fire pit, and we use this for digging latrines. It's also sharp on the side. You can use it as a cutting device. Here's something that got used a whole lot. This got passed around quite a bit. This is my Baco Laplander, which is an inexpensive, less than $30 folding saw. And this thing was amazing. There were several of these, or these type saws that were there. They all got used. Great for cutting down trees. I mean, anything up to probably a 6-inch diameter, this will make short work of. So absolutely, Baco Laplander, a great tool to have. So in the top of that pack, I actually had several pieces of kit. I've got an industrial size, industrial strength garbage bag. There's a million uses for this. This should be in everybody's kit no matter what, because you can just imagine you can do so much with this besides trash. I had a regular flashlight. It uses I think CR123A batteries. I didn't need this, but I had it in case I did. And my headlamp, and I use this a lot. At night, this stayed around my neck. First button, red light. And then we also have a white light if we need it, though we really never used white lights. But this is a great piece of kit, and as soon as it got dark, this goes around my neck, and I just have it with me until the sun comes back up. Also, I had a weapon light on my weapon, and we'll talk about that when we get to weapons. I got a big 2-quart canteen on the side. Use this a lot. This was my primary water source. And I've got an old Willie Peter bag insulating the inside, although you could use one of the newer ones if you want. I've got this is just a white rag. I ended up using this a lot for actually just wiping my nose. It was cold and my nose was constantly running. Some packs of hot hands. I didn't need these, but here's a great trick that one of the guys told us. He said if you take these hot hands, you put them in your boots at night, when you take your boots off, they'll dry your boots out, and then the next morning they're ready to go and they're warm. These will run all night. I didn't try that out. I was honestly just too tired and was in and out of my boots too much, but that's a neat little trick to remember. I've got more paracord. I've got more socks, which I didn't use. I actually stayed in the same 2 pair of socks the entire time, although I recommend always that you change out your socks if they ever feel damp or wet. Honestly, was just too tired to do it, and mine never got that wet. Got a small thing of baby wipes, also great just for any kind of personal hygiene. I ended up not using these. I took a second set of merino wool bottoms. I thought maybe mine would get wet. They didn't. I didn't need them. More socks. More socks. You can see I was really worried about my feet getting wet. I just got fortunate and it didn't happen. A spare beanie. I thought maybe my beanie would get wet or maybe someone else would need one. Didn't happen. These are my heavier gloves. These are a mechanic's gloves that are made for the wintertime. Wind insulation. I really thought I'd need them. I haven't gotten to use them. I didn't need them. The little Oakley gloves I had were fine. This is that fleece liner I was talking about for my sleeping bag. And again, I just didn't need it. Okay, lastly, I've got my Equic set, my Gore-Tex pants. Had it have started really raining, and I've got the top in here also. If it had started really raining hard, no doubt this would have been necessary, so I don't regret taking it, but I never needed it. You just never know what the weather's going to do, especially if it's long term. You might know for 3 days, but you won't know for a week. And so you kind of have to take something like this to keep yourself dry just in case. But at any rate, this is the older generation stuff. The newer generation stuff is better because it's lighter, it doesn't weigh as much, and it's thinner, it's easier to pack. But this is what I had, so this is what I took. I was just really glad I didn't need it, but you should still take a set of this or something comparable to it that'll keep you dry, that you can also use as an outer clothing to patrol in if you need to. One more little thing I took. This was fun. I took a poncho liner and I made a little bag out of it. And the idea was I was going to stick my feet in here or my hands in here if I was just sitting out on sentry duty, you know, in the cold. I didn't end up using it for any of that. What I did end up using it for was like a pillowcase. I shoved a jacket or some old clothes in here, made myself a little pillow. I guess that was nice. Do you need it? You don't need it, but it was one of those little comfort items I decided to take. And that's it, guys. That's pretty much so everything that I took in my rucksack and all my clothing. Now let's look at my field gear. So one piece of kit that I love, I take with me every time I go camping, hunting, if I'm going to be out for any extended period of time, more than a day really. If I'm going to have to prepare some food, is my old German mess kit. I probably had this one for 20 years and it's just fantastic. So it's pretty beat up, well worn, but it's got a top lid that you can use as like a little plate or a little bowl. And in here I have all my cooking stuff. So normally I would have a little bit of coffee in here. I've got my fuel, I've got a lighter, I've got my alcohol stove which runs off of yellow heat, I've got my stove stand, I've got a fire starting kit, and I've got my fork and spoon. But we cooked soup in this, we kept hot water in this stayed on the stove the whole time. This was well used, and I was really glad that I had it. And this is another one of those items. Does everybody in your squad need one? Probably not, but if a couple people in your squad have one, this makes life, preparing food, boiling hot water, much, much, much easier. Okay, so I brought you guys in a little closer to look at some of the gear. We'll cover that real quickly. First of all, my good old leather belt. Fine if you've got one of those tactical nylon belts or whatever. For me personally, I don't know if it's just because I'm old or what, but I just have found that I prefer a regular old leather belt. This is an old belt from the Belt Man, concealed carry belt I've had for for 20 years, and it's kind of my go-to in terms of belts. And on that belt, I've got my field knife. This is a carbon steel, probably about a 6-inch blade. It's something I can use in my hands for kind of hours on end. It just fits really well. No blisters or anything like that. It's a comfortable knife, and then it's got a 90-degree spine on it so that I can run my ferrule rod, which also stays on my little scabbard here. This just came with the knife. I don't even think these are made anymore, but I've got my ferrule rod that just stays on here. And I use this ferrule rod. There's nothing wrong with a lighter, guys, at all. But lighters, they can break. And one of the things I like the ferrule rod for is starting my alcohol stove, because I can kind of fling a spark down into it and it will light, rather than having to get down in there with a lighter that lighter, it wants to burn your hand. So kind of hard to tell when alcohol is burning sometime by looking at it. It's got such a, especially in the daylight, it's got such a clear flame. So anyhow, yeah, belt and knife. Look at my chest rig. This is one that I've kind of custom put together. I've had forever. It's an LBT chest harness, split front. So I like split front. I like to be able to open up the front, get in and out. If I'm laying prone, I can open it up and lay flat if I want to. And so I took my, I've got an Nalgene bottle for a canteen with a titanium cup on that, and even a lid for the cup. And then I've got capability to hold four magazines up front. All right, left side of the chest rig, I've got a closed top pouch that holds 2 magazines. I got a fast mag that holds another magazine. I can add another fast mag to that, make it 2. I can add secondary magazines, handgun magazine pouches, whatever I want to the front of that fast mag because it's Molly. I don't carry a secondary. I don't feel the juice is worth the squeeze. If you want to, that's fine. You can. I just don't think the weight and the maintenance and the hassle is worth having it when you've got a good primary. And really, I'm following the same lines as most militaries. Most soldiers don't carry a secondary. Okay, most. So that's it for the chest rig. Let's look at some of these weapon systems that we took. Took a thermal to scan by hand with. This is a weapon mounted thermal, but we didn't set it up that way. It's got an auxiliary battery pack. This came in very handy. We used this in conjunction with 2 guys that had a NODS Starlight capability, and this came in really handy. We had a mission where we had a simulated down pilot, and the NODS were able to locate a IR illuminator, and then we were able to use a thermal to verify that we had a down pilot below the IR illuminator, and that we did not have anyone else setting an ambush on that area because we had no heat signature from anybody else. So this was used a lot for scanning, and was definitely a valuable piece of kit. You obviously don't need this for the class, but it's something that was handy to have on a squad level. And lastly, my rifle. So I put this rifle together based on another short barrel rifle I had. I just stuck the lower on a full-size upper. You're going to need at least 3 to 4 inches of exposed barrel so they can set the mile system up on that barrel. They'll give you a blank firing adapter and zero the weapon for you depending on what sighting system you've got. I took this Primary Arms ACSS reticle. This is a 2X with shake awake technology. Fantastic optic. I didn't run irons. I didn't think I would need them, and I didn't. So that optic worked really well for me. Okay, weapon light. One thing that I found with the weapon light, this is an Enforce WML. It's been a good weapon light, and I do like these. They're lightweight. But this lock system doesn't really work in the field. Every single time I look down, I had it somehow flip that lock off. And with that lock being flipped off, now you can activate the light accidentally, and that's a big no-no out in the field. So I would say if you're going to use one of these weapon lights, they are quick detach. probably just leave it off the weapon until you needed it. It's just too much of a chance to bump that, and then you've told the enemy that's watching exactly where you are. I see this happen all the time out in the field with guys that are using weapon mounted lights. I thought this little lock safety was going to prevent that from happening, but for some reason it just keeps getting knocked down, and so that's a no-go on the weapon light. But other than that, weapon performed very well. I was very happy with it. Didn't fire a lot of rounds. We did a lot of patrolling, a lot of mission stuff. But at any rate, also I guess I'll mention this belt fed real quick. We took the Aries Strike out and let one other guy named Luke carry this around all weekend, this heavy beast. Set it up on blanks, made some modifications to the feed tray, and it seemed to run okay for him. We didn't get to shoot it a lot either, but they were able to set this up on blanks with the miles system also. So at any rate, guys, I hope that this video has helped you guys out a little bit, knowing what to pack, maybe what to take, and some ideas of what not to take. Of course, if you got some questions, of course, post them in the comments below. I'll try to monitor those. And if you have an opportunity, go out to the S&S Training Solutions Winter Forge event, which was going to be, 2021 now coming up, or 2022. Definitely do that, because that was a good time. We had a great time, a great bunch of guys, and it really pushed me, and I'm sure that it'll push you as well. So, okay, guys. So real quick, as I was going through the video, I realized that I needed to add a couple of points to it, a couple of things I meant to talk about that I sort of forgot about. Number one, my sleeping mat. I've got one of those square German sleeping mats that folds flat. Those are very important for giving you a barrier to keep you off the ground and off the wet ground or the cold ground. And also I like it because I was able to fold it square, put it in my rucksack, like in the radio pouch between my gear and my back, which offers me some padding on my back. But even more importantly, with this frame on my ruck, it fits right inside the frame. Just tucks inside right here. And this thing will just, I could just pull it out at any time and use it as a sitting mat, which is great. Put a knee on it, keep you off the wet ground, whatever, works perfect for that. And these German ones are just a thin, non-absorbent, rubber-like material. They fold out like this, just rectangular, perfect for sleeping on. And then you can just fold it up really to whatever shape that you want it to be, and use it as a sitting pad or whatever. But I wanted to cover that. That's an important piece of kit. Secondly, my watch. So don't forget to add a watch. I got out there, I had a checklist. I had the watch on my checklist, and as I start going through my gear before we're getting ready for the next day's operations, I can't find my watch. The whole weekend I kept thinking it's going to turn up. I put it in the wrong pouch, wrong pocket, something. It never turned up, and I ended up having left this at home even though it was on my checklist. So double check your checklist to make sure you don't forget anything, especially something as important as a watch. Everything we did there was based on a timeline. You may have a night patrol from 2300 to 0200. Well, you need to know what that is. Or maybe you've got fire watch from 0300 to 0400. Well, you don't want to just wake some guy up and go, hey man, what time is it? That's not very thoughtful. So without a watch, I was at a huge disadvantage, and it was just one of those stupid things that I did. But make sure you've got a watch and make sure it's working right. And lastly, compass. So I went to do my gear checklist. Like I talked about before, I always write a checklist and then work off that checklist, modify it to the training scenario. And I had a compass, so I open up my compass, it doesn't work. So I've had that compass for probably 30 years, and all of a sudden it decided to stop working on me. The problem was, I did this checklist, this gear list, like 2 days before the event. I didn't have time to order another one. I hit up a couple of local Army Navy stores, they didn't have anything. So what did I end up doing? I showed up there without a compass, and I told them right away, hey guys, I don't have a compass. Fortunately, S&S Training Solutions had an extra compass that I could check out and was able to use it the weekend. But not knowing that property and working off of just map, a compass, I was using it constantly. Not a day went by that I wasn't referring back to that compass. So I was glad that they had a loaner. But I guess the lesson to be learned is don't only check off the gear that you're going to be taking. Do it early enough that if there's a problem with your gear, something's broken, something's not working, you can get it replaced or repaired before the time of the mission or the operation, because otherwise it's not going to do you any good. So compass, got a new one, brand new. So hopefully this will last me another 30 years, and then at that time we'll buy another one if we need to. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to add those 3 points to the end of this video. I hope you learned something. If you got any questions, post them below. I'll be sure to answer them. If I don't know the answers, I'll get you somebody that does. And stay safe out there.